So I'm going to start with the presentation that I prepared in collaboration with Professor Tom Fearn. So we are divided the presentation. The first part I'm going to do, and the second part is going to be introduced by Professor Tom Fearn. And we are going to talk about the application of deep learning, mainly on NIR data. We are going to start for the beginning. I work in when I did my PhD, I worked with artificial neural networks, was what's now known as classical artificial neural network, because now, as you know, there are a lot of more fashion algorithms. So just to let you know about the history, we can find some example of application of artificial neural networks on NIR data. Some of the first ones are from 1991. In this case, Fred McClure works working with nicotine in tobacco. But in this case, the thing is that the instrument had only 8 filters, so difficult to manage. Maybe it was not the most properly algorithm for this type of data. Then ANN were very popular at a time, but maybe because there was a lot of problem of overfitting the models, the fashion passed. During a time was like, okay, you use ANN, this is very bad. And now this thing is again on fashion. So, okay, you know, what we want to show here is one example of what we worked in the past, one example of what we call now more modern or algorithms on talking about ANN, and some recipes or recommendation, because what we say, of course, Tom can introduce later on better than me. The important thing is that we have a database with enough information, enough sample to can model, because of course, if we don't have this, not PLS, not ANN, anything is useful to work on. So I'm going to show you an example that I worked on in the past that is related to the development of application for the prediction of ingredient composition in compound feeds, animal compound feeds. In this case, the animal compound feeds, the feed of the animals, is a mixture of a lot of ingredients, and it's also a processed product. We wanted to predict this ingredient composition, and this is not an easy application. So you have here two references of what we did in the past about ANN, and I'm going to show you which is the problem and what we did. You can see here different feed compounds, compound feed samples. You can see different presentation, and the most important is that for us that work in animal production, we need different type of feeds for different type of animals, because animals, we have different species, different ages, so the needs of this animal are different. So we have to provide different nutrition options. In this case, the legislation, the regulations say that we have to provide information about the chemical composition, as you know, moisture, protein content, fiber, etc., but also the ingredient composition. This means that the feed producer has to declare of the ingredient that they use in the production of a specific feed, and also the percentage of inclusion. This that we can see in the animal feeding, we cannot find in the human nutrition, because usually when you buy a food product, you don't know which is the ingredient composition exactly with the percentage. But the feed industry has to provide, because they have a lot of crises in the past, and well, the European Union decide this. Okay, so this is the application, just to introduce you why we need to develop this. When we started working with this, we identified some key factors in the development of this model. That is, of course, the calibration set characteristics. In this case, we knew that we need a large calibration set, but also high varied matrix of ingredients, because as I'm going to show you later on, we can have more than 60 or 70 ingredients that can be part of this sample. So this is a very, very heterogeneous population, okay? And also, of course, we thought about the chemometric treatment. The signal pretreatment was important, but also we wanted to test the possibility to develop model in a linear way, but also applying nonlinear. Why apply nonlinear strategies? Because when we test the linear, the results were not good. This is one message that I want to send to you. Always, we would like to, I know that learning is very, very fashionable now, but the thing is that we must start by the simplest way, and then if we don't have good results, imagine with PLS, that is more or less the basic now, we can prove, we can test another thing, but not the opposite. The opposite is not recommended, okay? This is the set we use to develop the models. We have more than 7,500 samples, so we have a large data set. And what you have here is the different ingredients that were used in this sample, in this calibration set. So we have more than 700 samples with all of these ingredients. For example, in some of the sample, for example, salt or soya milk are in most of the sample, are present in most of the sample, but there are other ingredients that they are only present in a few number of samples. So this is also something that affects the performance of the models. And the other thing is that you cannot see here, but I can mention that you can find in this population sample with, for example, 0% of wheat. No, they don't have wheat, but there are also with 60% of wheat. So we have also a non-linearity caused by the range of variation of the ingredients. So we have a lot of non-linearities sources. So I don't know. In this case, we try, of course, PLS, but as the results were not good, we try different non-linear methods, local regression, supervector machine, a Bayesian approach, but also we try artificial neural network with different option of the topology of the net, and also different training methods. When we work with an artificial neural network, what we have is an architecture that is like this. We have several layers. We have the input layer. one, two, or more hidden layers and the output layers. So the output layer. So what we have here, the input is where we put the information, the data that we have to develop the model. The hidden layer is where the different function work to make something, okay, to provide an answer in the output layer. So depending on how we design this architecture, this topology, we are going to have a net more or less complex, okay? So in each layer, what we have, these points are what we call neurons or nodes. So we can put more, we can put less. So all of these make the architecture of the net more or less complex, as I mentioned. What we try in this example, we try the classical multi-layer perceptron. That is a feed-forward network. That means that we go always from the inputs to the outputs. This is the direction of working. There are other nets that can work in the opposite or in both sides, go from the input to the output and from the output to the input to make some correction, but in this case, we go just from the input to the output. It's supervised learning. We use the sigmoid function in the hidden layers, and we try two training algorithms, the backpropagation and the Levenberg-Marquardt. Well, backpropagation is mainly, this is very, sorry, because I usually touch the screen. Backpropagation is very, very popular, okay? It's based on the error gradient descent technique, and which is the main advantage. It's very flexible, but of course, everything has disadvantage, and the disadvantage you have here, the time to the convergence is slow, and also the overfitting is, we can have overfitting very, very easy. The second one is the Levenberg-Marquardt. It's a second order optimization method. This is more robust than that's the first one. The convergence time is better, but the computational times are really high. I have to say that I developed this model more than 15 years ago, so now the computers are better, so maybe, but when I tried this, with the computer at that time, I need around 20 hours for develop the model, so it's too much. And the last one is the radial basis function. It's not a multi-layer perceptron, but it's also organized in layers. So it's similar, but it's a bit different. So in this case, we can just have one input, one hidden, and one output layer, so 3 layers. It's also feed-forward, so we go from input to output, and we use different functions in the hidden layer. And what we have is that it's faster than the previous one. This is the result that we have for each ingredient. Remember that is ingredient percentage of ingredient inclusion in a mix, okay? This is the result that we have in prediction, not in cross-validation. This is prediction, okay? So we use a test of sample that was not used in the development of the model, and with PLS, when we have the prediction error, you can see a lot of stars, so it means that the protocol, the validation protocol that we use was, we passed the recommendation of this protocol. So for most of the cases, we don't have good result with PLS. We tried, the first time we tried local regression that I'm not going to explain because it's not the objective of this presentation, but what we saw was that we have very good results with local regression. So because of that, we decided also to test other method as artificial neural network. So in this case, with this architecture, we try as input layer, we try the data, not the raw data, we pre-treat the data with derivatives, and also 30 principal components. We try different types of inputs. We try 1 or 2 hidden layers, depending on the algorithms, because some of the algorithms just can use 1 hidden layer. We try different number of nodes of neurons in the hidden layer. You can see here from 10 to 40 in the multi-layer perceptron, and from 25 to 300 in the radial basis function. And always we have just 1 neuron in the last layer, in the output layer. Some of the results with the back propagation, I have to say that one thing is that we always test 10,000 iteration. That means that we train its net 10,000 times. So it's because what the nets work in this way. You have some weights at the beginning, you start training, and then you are going recalculating this weight according to the difference in the residual in the prediction error. So if you train a lot of time, it's easier to have good results. So but this is the recommendation for this kind of algorithm. In this case, we test both the principal component and the data points, okay? And we test 1 hidden layer or 2 hidden layers with different number of neurons. In this case, we found that for this specific net, was better to use 2 hidden layers, but the number of neurons was not significant for this application. One thing that you can see here is first repetition and second repetition, and you say, why you have this? In this case, all the network were trained completely twice. Why? Because each time you train a same network, you are going to have different results. So we wanted to know if the results are significantly different or not. In this case, we have very, very similar results the first and the second time. So this is good because this speaks us about the stability of the network. This is the other example, the Levenberg-Macquart. This is the one that I mentioned that has a lot of a high computational time. So in this case, we can only train with 1 hidden layer and with 30 principal components. Was not possible to train with 222 data points. Was not possible at that time. Maybe now, but not at that time. And in this case, the number of iteration of epochs was tested with 50, from 50 to 200. And again, we found that we have from when we train with 50 epochs, we have results worse than when we train with more iteration. But we didn't find difference between this other option, and always we repeat twice. And the last one was the radial basis function. In this case, why we put more number of neurons? Because the radial basis function works like a local, each neuron works like a local neuron. It's not like a global neuron. So we need more neurons to cover all the variability. So what we see here was that, I don't remember exactly the number, but we need at least a number of neurons to cover or to model the complexity of the application. I think was from 100 we have more or less the same results. Okay, but what's clear that this neural network the results was not such good as the one that we have with the previous one. And this is the final conclusion. We have here a summary of the result that we have with all the models. In this case, I show you for the prediction of wheat, the inclusion of wheat, and the prediction of sunflower. And you can see here that this is with PLS, the results. This is the standard error of prediction. And I put here with artificial neural network the result. And you can see that when we use nonlinear approaches, always we have better result in this application than when we use PLS. This is one conclusion. And the other is that we have different results depending on the method that we use. If we go to the artificial neural network, the radial basis function didn't provide as good result as the one that we have with the multi-layer perceptron. Okay, this could be because maybe we need more number of neurons, but we didn't try this, so okay. But the difference are important. Another thing is that why I put always these two examples, because the prediction of wheat, even when it's one of the ingredients that is most used in feeds, it was very difficult and was one of the worst using PLS, and the prediction of sunflower meal was one that provides good results because it's a very different ingredient in comparison with the other. So you can see that with nonlinear, always we improve the result that we have with the linear, but in the case of the wheat, the results are even better, so the improvement are better because we have very bad result in this case. We have more non-linearity in the behavior of this parameter. Of course, with other methods, we have also good result, but as it's not the goal of this presentation, I'm not going to mention. And if you want to know anything else about this, we can discuss later on. And now Tom can show you the more recent history, deep learning. Okay.
How does this one?
Just swipe.
Yeah,
Swipe left.
That's it.
That's it. That's it.
Okay.
Like in big tablet.
Okay, so that was 15 years ago. So in terms of neural nets, that's ancient history. So let's come up to date a bit. In about the last 5 years, there's been a resurgence of interest in applying neural nets to NIR calibration. And it's not surprising, deep learning is going to solve all the problems of the universe, so why shouldn't it also solve the problem of NIR calibration? The abstract for this promised a review. I've not really done a review because when I started to do a review, I discovered there were some reviews, so why bother? And there are a couple there. So what I did discover is that it's quite hard to find applications of deep learning in NIR that are not convolutional neural nets, and there are good reasons for that. But so I had to search through JNRS, for example, and going backwards, and got about a dozen papers going back to 2021, and they were pretty well all convolutional neural net. And the big advantage of the convolutional neural nets is that they can invent a pre-treatment for you. And they were invented not to do NIR spectra, they were invented to do image analysis. But they seem to work quite nicely, certainly sometimes with NIR spectra. And so there are two of the reviews that I found. The one by Kerry Welsh's last year JNRS, it focuses on CNN and it focuses on fruit because that's what he works on. And there's another more wider and also deeper review because it tackles the really difficult questions by Mishra et al. There are three of the et als in the audience. If you want to know more about that, you can ask them. And that's, I'm not saying this just because they're in the audience. It's a really nice paper. If you're interested in this area, you should read it. It asks more questions than it answers, but it asks the important questions. So all I'm going to do is show you a couple of pictures, three pictures, I think, from a more recent example, which is essentially work by one of my PhD students, Chen Hao Kui, and I take a tiny bit of the credit, not for doing any of the work. What's the point of having a PhD student if you have to do the computing yourself? But for asking, my input basically was to ask the awkward questions like, how on earth do we see what this is doing? And what's the convolutional part of this doing? And he provided the answers. And there are three, and that's in Kevin Lab, there are three examples in there. This one is the sort of middle-sized data set. There are 1,000 training samples and about 600 separate test samples, which were not used at all in the training. There was a much bigger set. There was one with about 7,000 samples in, and there was what we decided to call a small set, which had about 500 in, and we traced them all through. But these are from it's wheat protein. It's an instrument, shortwave near infrared. It's 161 wavelengths from 850 to 1650 in 5 nanometer steps. So it's not an enormous number of input variables, and it's a nice, easy application. So this is a schematic, not a picture of the actual network that architecture that Chen now used. It's got the interesting part, the convolutional neural nets. This bit looks just like a old-fashioned neural nets and everything connected to everything network. The first bit, which is the convolutional part, has what this shows is everything connected to everything. What's happening here schematically is don't touch everything. Two of the input neurons are connected to one of the neurons in the convolutional layer. So they go in pairs, and it's like a Savitsky-Golan filter. It's a filter that runs along or there and filters. In the case of the application, 5. So each one of these has 5 connected to it. So it's like a Savitsky-Golan filter of bandwidth 5, except that we don't specify the weights. The network finds the weights. So it can find any set of linear weights to give you a nice pre-treatment. It can't do everything. This is a linear filter that's going along, so it can't do SND or MSC, for example, because it doesn't do multiplicative things. So it's a bit limited in what it can do, and if anybody can find a way of making it do a multiplicative pre-treatment, that would be great. And the sizes of the layers are, there's one more layer than in the schematic. There are 3 hidden layers, and they go down to 161, 36, 18. So it's not enormous, quite a lot. Although in terms of what I'm used to thinking of, it's a lot of parameters. The reason it doesn't overfit, at least in these examples, is because there's quite a bit of regularization in there, the penalty on the size of the waves. So a couple of pictures, and these are the pictures that I really liked in the paper. And one of them is this one. So there's the raw spectrum. And there's what the spectrum looks like after it's been through the convolutional there. So this is what you see if you try and extract what's in the convolution. After it's been through the convolution, and it's in that orange layer. And there's what you get if you take the same data and you do a first derivative Savitsky-Garlin. Okay, so not the same, but not all that different either. So it's found for itself that you get good performance with this spectra if you do something that looks a bit like first derivative. And that's perhaps not surprising because you've got up and down movement and the first derivative will take some of that out. So that came as a surprise to me, pleasant surprise. It's doing something sensible in there. And the other picture, which I quite like, so Chen Hao's answer to how do we see what this is doing is to actually compute a sort of pseudo set of coefficients. So if you think about when you've got a linear equation, if you do PLS, for example, and you end up with a linear equation, then the coefficients are the slope of the equation at the derivative with respect to that input variable. And if you can estimate the derivative by just perturbing the spectrum a bit. So you add a bit, take it off. It's like you learn to do derivatives in school, except you do it numerically. And if you did that for a linear equation, you would get this. And if you do it for a nonlinear version, like the neural net, then you get a different set of coefficients for each input spectrum because the slope isn't the same everywhere. So what he did was to take 100 randomly out of the training set and calculate the three-day coefficient vector for each one of those 100, and there are 100 plotted there. So you can see two things. One is you can sort of at least get something that looks a bit like the regression vector out of PLS, which is really very useful. But you can also see the extent of the nonlinearity because they're not varying an awful lot. So this isn't all that nonlinear. In one of the other examples, there's a lot more variability on there, and you can see it must be highly nonlinear. So some final thoughts in the last 30 seconds. I was a bit skeptical when Chen Hao started this. I thought there's a hell of a lot of parameters here. How's it going to not overfit? And I do now think, having seen this and having seen some of the other published stuff, that there is a role for convolutional neural networks in our calibration. I suspect only when you've got decent sized data sets. I would like to see the research that